let's go ahead and get all of our key poses in, and then we'll sort of spread them out and put them where they need to be. So I'm going to go on ones, which is basically every frame, and to set up my poses that I'm going to have for this jump. And we'll go through the whole aspect of games versus VFX type of jump animation that we need to create, because we're creating this for video games. So for our second frame, which is going to be our down frame, most likely our anticipation frame, bring the character down. Now I'm going to use this rig. It's called the gimbal underscore anim. You may have other rigs that may have something different, or like a second cog, but this pretty much works like a cog, but it's inside of the actual cog controller, which controls all the upper body motion. What I'm going to do is zero that out to be 0, and I'm going to pretty much zero out my spine as well. All my spine controllers to be 0. Make sure I got all this 0 down here. Okay, so what this is going to allow me to do is basically reset the whole spine, so everything can be sort of straightforward, linear, without having to do too much rotation out of the normal orientation that the character's in. So with this, I'm going to grab all my controllers, set a key to make sure everything's keyed. Go ahead and start getting my pose going. And what I want to do, one of the things I want to make sure I do is keep the head basically at 0 vertical. So on frame 1, my head is basically over my waist, which is at the center of gravity down here. And I want to make sure my head stays down there when he goes down to jump. So I want to push him back just a tad bit. I'll use the cog to push him back just enough so his head's not too far from the original spot down here. So on frame 3, I'm going to go ahead and do the first pose to get him up in the air, which is bring him So I'm going to bring the spine up, have him tilt his head up just a tad bit. I'm going to get his arms. They're not going to be up per se. Most of the time, especially VFX and feature film, you want those arms to drive you up as you jump. But since there's not going to be a lot of time for the player to sort of see all this happen, and we don't want the arms and everything to pop sort of in place as the character is jumping, we want to try to get this guy up and at him. I'm going to put his feet barely touching the ground and put get his cog up a little bit higher. I'm going to sort of point my feet inward. So what's going to happen is on the next pose, I'm going to put the feet together. I do want the arms sort of straight. Did push the calves down. So what's going to happen now is the character is going to basically jump up, and you want this sort of almost like the legs are straight as he's pushing off, and then we want to sort of offset the legs to sort of get this nice little overlap in the feet sort of this display. So this is be my third pose and my fourth pose, and this would normally actually be at frame 5, this fourth pose. So we're actually still like pretty much close to what the actual animation is going to be as far as timing goes for right now. So I want to put both these feet semi close together on this pose. And for our fourth pose, I'm going to actually move my knee lookouts a little bit up here and keep them with there. So we got, for auto pose, anticipation pose, going straight up. Oops, on my anticipation pose, I can put the arms up and ready, but they're just not going to go any further forward than what you see here, just to prevent the drastic pop that will happen. So now that I got my fourth pose, I'm going to go into my fifth pose. And the fifth pose is going to be a little bit something familiar. I'm going to put them up just a little bit, bring both the feet up I'm going to drag this my right foot down a little bit, have my left sort of lead. Let's get my knee look at a little out here, just out of the way. And I'm going to push or rotate my secondary cog the opposite way and rotate my spine toward, just to keep the head sort of in line right here so it doesn't go off too far. And then right here as well, I'm going to bring the arms up as if gravity's starting to take over. Bring the calves up. So now I got my first pose, which is it's going to be pretty much the apex pose of the character up, and it's going to idle in this pose for about 5 to 7 frames. It's going to idle in that pose, and it's sort of just going to hold. And during that time, when the player initially pushes, because it's going to get up to 5 frames, the player is going to be up to this height, and it's just going to hold, and that hold is going to represent just a subtle in the whole animation in general. Sort of get the character to the right height, allow it to sit, allow the player to register that, okay, we jumped this high. So I'm going to go now, my 6th frame, I'm going to keep it the same. I'm going to bring them up just a tad bit, start getting the right foot up to match where the left foot's at, and then I'll push the left foot out a little bit forward, like so, and get the arms up just even more. So between 5 and 6, this will be your change for less. Then make sure you have a key on all those poses. Go to your 7th pose, and your 7th pose is just basically going to be the opposite of either 4 or 3. Want to do 4, so I'm actually going to go to 4, hold down middle mouse, and go to frame 8, and just press that. So it's going to go from frame 7 to 8, which is going to be on the way down. I want to make a few adjustments where the head's going to be looking towards the ground a little bit more. The arms and the calves are still going to be behind us. So I'm actually just going to delete frame 8 on the arms and the calves. I'm going to basically come up, I want to set a key, and then from there I'm going to adjust it so that the animation looks a little bit more appeasing. Once that's done, I am going to leave, let's see what foot, my left or my right foot, I'm going to leave it up just a tad bit. So now if I were to go through my keys, I can see that it does sort of like almost like a bicycle kick. Make sure there's keys on all those frames. Then frame 9, I want to have the character, I'm going to basically grab all the feet and the cog and just drag them down to that toe touches into that pose. And in this pose I can play around a little bit more. I can go, I wouldn't say extreme, but I can push arms up a little bit higher because this is right before he actually hits the ground. Keep the head about the same, but I also can do a few things with stretching the character. So I'm going to grab all 3 of the spines. And on frame 7, 8, on frame 9, I'm going to stretch them out until the head almost reaches where the head is on frame 8. And I'm just simply going back and forth because I'm still on 1s. And I got it about close enough. And I'll show you what happens once we start moving on here. But I want to get this frame 9, toes are barely touching. And now from here, frame 10, the character is going to completely impact the ground. So I'm going to simply go to frame 30 where I put my idle pose prior, go to frame 10, press S, and now I got my idle pose from frame 9 to idle pose. But on the idle pose, I want to adjust this to be the pose that hits the ground. So I'm going from 9 to this pose. using my Gimmo cog, secondary cog, to bend, rotate the character over a little bit. I want to push him back, because when the body lands, the butt's going to get pushed back, and the head's going to stay in this vicinity, in that line of action, that center of gravity that we've been talking about. So once that hits and once that lands, now we have the character in a position to where he's going to squash down, just like a bouncing ball. And he hits the ground, he squashes, and he'll hold it for that split second, and then come back up in time for the player to feel that he still has control over the character. So here's the hit. I'll go ahead and make sure I got a key on all the characters. And then from here, I want to do the same pose. Press S. I want to bring up the cog a little bit, but I am going to actually rotate the secondary cog a little bit more and rotate the spine as well. I want to drag down the clavicles. And I may need to adjust the rotation from the front view, because when he comes down, he sort of comes down crooked and he goes up there. Now at this point, the character is going to be bouncing back to idle. So since I have all my poses on ones, I can go ahead and spread out all these poses to where they need to be. Now the simplest way for me to do this and to understand it, what's going on, is I know at frame 5 I want the character basically at the height that the character is going to be at. So I'm going to go ahead and grab from frame 5 and to frame 10 and drag all those frames out to about frame 9. Then frame 9, which is the apex of the jump after he gets to a certain height, I'm going to drag that to about 7. Drag frame 4, which is that initial first pose we talked about, and the head's going to sort of be the height of what the character is going to be. I'm going to drag that out to frame 5. So by the time the player presses the button and he gets to frame 5, the character is going to be already at the height that he needs to be for the duration of the animation for the jump. So now what I want to do, because frame 3 and 2, I want to grab both of those and scooch them over to be 3 and 4 now. So it's going to have 3 keys from this anticipation to 4 to 5 immediately happen. So one of the things that we want to do, because when the character presses the jump button, you want him to almost already be into a position to where the anticipation is already there. Because the character, it's going to blend, and it's going to blend fast enough so you'll see the animation. The player will sort of see the animation take place, but he won't feel the pop because it's going to blend, but it's already going to feel like the character's already jumping. So one or two things we can do. We can either actually use frame 3 as the very first frame, or we can adjust frame 1 to be halfway down to where frame 3 is at. And there's an easy way to do that is just, right now you got between 1 and 3, you can grab 2, middle mouse it to 1, press S and use that pose. Or go back and adjust the pose to be even further, I want to say even further down. It's not rotate, that's going to push him down. Rotate that inner cog to get even further down, so when the button's pressed, the character goes from this idle to this position within a matter of over a frame. But one of the things you want to do is see where the head's located here. You want to make sure it gets close, so when it comes down here it feels natural, that he doesn't sort of pop. So I'm going to grab the secondary controller here, cog controller, push him down. So now from frame 30 to 1, it won't be as drastic. So basically from frame 1 to 6 to 5 to 7, you have initially your timing for your first part of the animation. Now we want to hold the pose of the actual jump itself a little longer. So I'm going to grab in frame 10. It should be around 10, but it'll be the secondary frame of the hold where he's up in the air. So you want to grab, or make sure you select all your controllers first. My apologies. Grab all those frames, and then you're going to push it to be about frame 12. So the character is basically going to be in air from frame 5 all the way to 12. And the jump, it's going to hold, and he's going to come down. And you can see as he comes down, if you left it all on ones, it gives this sort of nice snappy type feel. But it can be a little bit too fast and too jarring. So all we got to do is go in, and we're going to push basically our last frame when he's crouched down, 16 and 15 and 14, all of those frames until you hit about frame 20 right here. Then you get frame 13, probably push it in between 12 and 17. Oops. And then from here, all we need to do is start cleaning up. And the biggest thing that I see on this particular animation is the head. See how it snaps from frame 5 to 7, and then it sort of just stays there. We need to adjust that. So from 5 to 7, easiest way for me to do that is to grab this guy, and you could probably adjust the spine too, but you want the head to sort of stay in that same general area. I can push this part back so the head sort of stays there and the body sort of feels like it catches up, and then that slight movement here, I can either have that pushed back as well or keep it depending on how you desire. I'm just going to let it stay. Then we sort of still have the same issue on frame 12 to 13, or from 14 to 17, the head sort of pushes back. So in order to keep it there, I'm going to actually push you back. You can go into the graph editor and adjust it to get even more precise timing on it. But the big thing is making sure that head doesn't go too far off or veers too far off in front or in back when it come up and down. And right now it sort of hits sort of hard. So it's something that we can do is just sort of go into our cog, go into our graph editor, clean that up quite a bit. So we can sort of adjust those, but just be cognizant of what else it affects when you start adjusting your graph editor, because it's going to affect your feet and pretty much everything else overall. But from here, now you got from frame 30 to sort of add in more settle, have the character drop, you can have the character come up a little bit sooner. And if you put this in game and find your jump is not where it needs to be, it's a simple thing as grabbing all your keys in Maya or in whatever program you're using, Maya, and just adjusting accordingly. So you need to hang more, you grab all the keys that it's on, let it hang more. So to recap what we just went over, we did all of our major poses on ones, and that's just basically one keyframe after, or one frame per pose. And once we got all of our poses, we basically spread them out to hit the right timings that we needed. And right now the timings that we needed particularly for this jump is frame 1 we put down to the anticipation pose, frame 3 and 4 or the initial getting off the ground going up, frame 5 the character is already up to the height the character needs to be jumping at. Then basically from frame 7 all the way to 17, it completes this arc, gets to the apex, and stays in this jump pose. And then from 17 and down, it sort of comes down to a resting stop, or it comes down to the fall, where he gathers his energy and gets back to his idle. And he gets back to his idle fast enough so that if the player wants to move and he jumps out, it can break anything between 25 and 30 without any major issues. It can start the run or whatever. So let's go ahead and just add the settle. So he comes in, he jumps, instead of getting to this pose right away and just stopping, I was going to set the keys on frame 40. It's going to come up. I'm going to have him upshoot just a little bit. He's going to sort of just come down to his idle. And then I can sort of do the same thing with the arms. As he's coming up, I have the clavs, you know, coming down. And as he hits his apex, I can just, when he comes up, I can push him up a little bit. Oops, wrong plate. Push you guys back a frame. Move you guys up. And you sort of play around with it. So I'm going to move to about frame 30. So yeah, this is how you need to create your jump animation. So the only thing I would say about the beginning, I know this is different than we normally talk about when we plan out our animations. We did all of our poses on ones. Normally we spread our poses out on the frames that we needed them to be at. The reason I do them on one sometimes is just allows me to sort of focus on the pose and the arcs that I'm trying to achieve, and then I can sort of play around with the timing a little bit easier and a little bit more freer, knowing that I got all my key poses and all the frames and everything where I need them to be. Alright, any questions or anything like that, you know, just hit me up, chat below, and I'll see you on the next one.